Hello, 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 and welcome to the return of A Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton. Here at A Seat at the Table, our podcast is designed to serve as a conduit that directly impacts predominantly Black communities with decision makers and those with connections to them, ultimately ensuring communities' needs are met by accessing available resources. We are here today at a different hour with a very special guest. Looking forward to this. We are bringing on Dr. Umar Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the doctor of clinical psychology and a certified school psychologist. More importantly, he's a black man in America who knows he's a black man in America. We are thrilled to have him with us tonight, thinking it not robbery to share in this space as we continue to plow along. At this time, without any further ado, please welcome Brother Umar Johnson.
Peace and black power. Glad to be with you.
Definitely, definitely. So let's just jump right into it. First thing I want to do, of course, is highlight the fact that you are moving along in the school, the Garvey School. I want you to talk about that for a moment. Let our listeners, our viewers, have an opportunity to know where they could go to support, find out more about your endeavor as a whole and why you started along this particular journey.
The status of the Frederick Douglass and Marcus Garvey Academy at this time is we are in the process of securing a contractor who can take care of the plumbing and the HVAC concerns. That is something we've been working on since we got to school 2 years ago, but we are in a much better place now. We have had some quality referrals as of late. It looks like we may have definitely secured the plumber we need, and I'm hoping that we have also secured the HVAC specialist that we need. So if both of these brothers pan out and they're able to get the permit from the city to begin the work, we're hoping to have the Garvey School as well as the Nat Turner and Jean-Jacques Dessalines Gymnasium ready for a grand opening celebration, first annual Unapologetically African Festival, which will be held outside of the school with the conference as well to be held inside of the school. We're looking at doing that late August or early September. So we're just pushing along. It's been tough because you had to find contractors who are both reasonable and responsible. And we have found some who are responsible but not reasonable. We found others who were reasonable but not responsible. So trying to limit our options to only black contractors has had its ups and downs, but I think we are in a good place right now. And for brothers and sisters who want to support us, we encourage them to go to the Cash App, $FDMG School, go to their PayPal, paypal.me/FDMG Academy. They can also mail their check or money order into the FDMG Academy, P.O. Box 9634, Wilmington, Delaware, 19809. And that information is also on my website at drumarjohnson.com. So we are pushing steadily along.
I appreciate that. Definitely. So let's jump right into the reasoning behind such schools as the one that you're just talking about. Leads us right into school to prison pipeline, zero tolerance, and no child left behind. We've heard a lot of people talk in and around and about what they believe no child left behind is, what zero tolerance is and or was, and how it has a direct correlation and or lack thereof in some people's minds in terms of pipelining that school to prison pipeline. So what say you? I have opinions, but I would like for you to give your opinions about, what's going into this school to prison pipeline, what's behind it, and how it's disproportionately impacting us as black folks.
Well, when you look at the zero tolerance rule, it's unfortunate. It's very racist, but it's also very unfortunate because it grew out of the Columbine massacre, which was a white massacre of white students by white classmates in a white suburb. And that massacre and others similar to it translated into this school policy that has swept the entire country, where children are being expelled from school permanently for making threats that they can't even carry out. I mean, record numbers of preschoolers are being sent home for good, can never walk into another public school the rest of their life at 3, 4, and 5 years old because they said, I'm going to blow up the school or I'm going to shoot you to the teacher. Clearly not acceptable comments, but at the same time, this is coming from a baby who can't really grasp the full ramifications of what they are saying. Why would you expel a 3-year-old from school for saying he's going to shoot you? He doesn't have the means or the method in order to carry that out. But of course, most teachers are white women. They predominate the public schools. They dominate the Harrisburg schools. They dominate the Lancaster schools. They dominate the Coatesville schools, the Reading schools, the Philadelphia schools, the Chester schools, and all other schools. And they have nothing but contempt, many of them, for our children in the first place. So any tactic that is at their disposal to rid them of excess numbers of Black boys, they're going to use it. And I can't believe that our Black elected officials, I can't believe that our Black grassroots organizations across the country, and of course here in Pennsylvania, haven't done more to get zero tolerance removed. Zero tolerance is the equivalent of mandatory minimum sentencing in the prison. That's what it is. You can't look at the specific context of the situation. You can't look at the personality or academic background or family background of the child. You can't take into account the emotionality of the situation. The fact that he made a quote unquote terroristic threat gets him thrown out of the school. I've known young Black boys who were expelled simply for saying Taliban or Al Qaeda or something like that. He's never been out the country, never been to the Middle East, don't know what he's talking about. He's just saying something to incite a joke or upset the teacher, and is leading to expulsions, not temporary expulsions, but permanent. When we talk about the school to prison pipeline, we have to look at the fact that public education in America no longer serves its original intent, which was to prepare our children for work. The purpose of public education was labor. It was not college. It was not trade school. It was not entrepreneurship. It was to make sure that America had a better educated, low-wage earner whose labor could be exploited by the corporations. Well, if there's no jobs for Black people, if there's no jobs to prepare Black people, then for which to prepare Black people, what is the purpose of public education today? And I would argue the purpose of public education for Black children is to prepare the boys for prison and the girls for poverty. And that's exactly what it's doing. I've been told directly from judges that they are getting more referrals into the criminal justice system from public school than they get from the street police. And speaking of the street police, that's another thing that needs to be taken out of our schools for districts that still have city cops in the school, because these police officers are taking jurisdiction over behavioral incidents that are usually the prerogative of the principal, the vice principal, or the dean of students. So for example, if I get into a fight and I break another student's nose, that might get me a 5-day suspension, but it don't get me arrested. But now that you have a city cop in the school, he will take jurisdiction over that fight. And now I'm leaving the school in handcuffs. I have a juvenile record already, when historically that would have been handled in-house. So we have too many police stepping in, pushing school administrators to the side, and giving these boys an early entrance into the school to prison pipeline, which I actually call the psychoacademic holocaust, which is 6 steps: miseducation, special education, psychiatric medication, juvenile incarceration, psychological frustration, which includes suicide, and then you have premature extermination, which is homicide. And for the record, the leading cause of death for Black boys in America age 1 to 19 is homicide. And the third leading cause of death of Black boys in America, according to the Center for Disease Control, is suicide. And the second leading cause of death for Black boys 1 to 19 is unintentional injuries, drownings, accidental shootings, car accidents, things of that nature. Homicide, accidental injuries, and suicide. It's a psychoacademic holocaust.
Hey, let's transition into the IEPs. One of the great things I always loved about your work when you was here in Harrisburg, and at the great Premier Arts and Science Charter School was how you clearly stated coming in there that you would be testing our young kids, in terms of for more so acceleration as opposed to remediation. And so
Absolutely.
ensuring that, just like we know that a lot of times when our parents are approached for our students to be tested, we have this whole taboo feeling around this testing process. But you oftentimes push the fact that if given the correct assessment devices, your babies may in fact receive an IEP for acceleration as opposed to remediation. Could you talk a bit about that before we talk about the importance of your book that you have out as well, which lists and tells our parents that parental guide to really have an understanding on the types and quality of questions that must be asked and must be answers must be given to when those parents go into these rooms with these individuals who don't typically have our kids' best interests in heart.
One thing that I would have to say on the issue of special education and the IEP is Black parents have been seriously miseducated about special education. They do not understand what it really is. And too often, Black parents are led to believe that special education is some sort of solution, that it is a dream world that their child will walk into and suddenly have their problems fixed. And the saddest part about Black children in special education is that most of them don't need it. What they need is remediation. What they need is more practice. What they need is a tutor. And I tell parents all the time, if my child was delayed in a skill area, they would get a tutor. A person working with your child for 45 minutes to 90 minutes twice a week is going to improve their skill levels much better, much quicker than a special ed teacher. In fact, the IEP is misleading itself when it says individual education program, because rarely is it individual. Rarely will your child get one-to-one help. Most of the time, they're going to be helped in large group. It's not even small group anymore because so many children are being put in special ed that some of those classrooms are getting just as filled as the regular education classrooms. So Black parents need to understand that special education can cause more problems than it actually solves. And part of this is due to the misleading nature of the system of special ed. Because when you are a special ed student, when you have an IEP, you are graded based on progress towards the annual IEP goal. You're not graded based on progress towards state standard. So if you got two kids in the fourth grade, both of them got an A in reading, the report card doesn't tell the one parent that your son's A is not based on achievement. It's based on effort. This kid has an A because he's mastering fourth grade reading curriculum. Your son is not mastering fourth grade reading curriculum. He has an A because he is progressing towards his IEP goal. And it is that right there, that fact, that reality that is misleading Black parents into thinking special ed is working because they have a child who came home with all F's last year, and now they're coming home with all A's, and the parent thinks it's because special ed is working. No, your child is making an honor roll because they're not being graded based on achievement. They're being graded based on effort. That is one of the things that need to change. I think every child in special ed, their report card should be very clear so parents know your child's grades are not a reflection of achievement. They are a reflection of progress towards the IEP goal. But let us be honest about something. Special education functionally is used to perpetuate the Black-white test gap. It is used to perpetuate the myth of Black intellectual inferiority, and it is creating a permanent underclass of Black children. The more we push special ed in the Black community, the fewer opportunities Black children will get. Now, let me clarify.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the deaf kids and the blind kids and the brain injured kids and the orthopedically impaired kids. I'm not talking about the speech and language kids and the moderate and severely intellectually disabled kids or the moderately to severely autistic children. I'm not talking about them. Most of our kids are not in there for that.
That's
Most
right.
of our children across America are in special ed for a learning disability that you cannot prove. You cannot prove a learning disability. If somebody can prove it, I want them to show me how. You can't. I've been evaluating children for 25 years. You cannot prove a learning disability. It is a professional opinion. It is an academic hypothesis. It is not a scientific fact. Number two, emotional disturbance, which is the most subjectively applied label in special ed. So many Black boys across Pennsylvania and across this country are classified as emotionally disturbed because they can't get along with one white teacher. One white teacher, and now they're diagnosed or classified, as emotionally disturbed. Well, if you look at the definition, the federal definition of ED, it clearly tells you that it must be a pattern of behavior where the child has trouble building and maintaining relationships with teachers and peers. It doesn't say teacher, it says teachers. So if a child is being classified as emotionally disturbed because one white teacher don't like them, that was a misclassification. And then your ADHD for other health impairment. That right there is probably the greatest miscarriage of justice because you have Black boys who can learn. Some of them are the smartest kids in the class, but they have an IEP for ADHD. That's behavior. They
Right.
don't need no IEP for ADHD. What they need is a 504 plan. But the schools don't want to give them a 504 plan because they don't get a subsidy for the 504 plan. They get a subsidy for the IEP. So they streamroll all the Black boys into special ed for ADHD when those boys don't need nothing other than a 504 accommodation plan. But if the parents don't know, the
Right.
parents can't stop it. And that's why I wrote the books that I have.
So you have some parents right now and some grandparents, just as importantly, that are listening, that might not know about the 504 plan versus IEP because, to your point, the schools are not really pushing the 504 plans. They're pushing the IEP. They're pushing that over characterization of what the student might need based on their professional opinion. You talk a bit about the 504 plan for those parents and grandparents who don't understand what that is, and this would be a great point, point to bring up your book at this time that helps them along the way.
Okay. 4 differences between the 504 and the IEP. And I just saw as well, Brother Karl, before we began the broadcast, I saw a flyer for a Juneteenth program in Harrisburg on Sunday the 20th. I can't promise anything, but if my Sunday is open, I will try to fly back from Atlanta in time because I have Atlanta on the Juneteenth day, the 19th.
I appreciate it.
I'm going to try to fly back and drive up from the
We
Philadelphia
take care.
airport.
We take care of you when you get here. You already know that.
Yes, sir. I'm gonna try to get there. I'm gonna try to get there and bless the mic.
No doubt.
So 4 differences between the 504 and the IEP. Number 1, an IEP is for children with learning disabilities. You cannot get an IEP unless you were evaluated by the school psychologist and classified with one of 13 learning disabilities: autism, speech and language, deafness, blindness, brain injury, orthopedic impairment, intellectual disability, specific learning disability, developmental delay, the 13 special ed disabilities. You must have been evaluated and classified with one of those 13 disabilities in order to get an IEP. To get a 504, you can have any disability that affects your ability to function. That's the second difference. You get a 504 if you have trouble functioning in school. You get an IEP if you have trouble learning. I'm going to say this again. You get a 504 if you have trouble functioning in school. You get an IEP if you have trouble learning in school. Okay?
That's right.
The third difference, When you get an IEP, there is modification of the instruction, which is just to say that we're going to dumb down the learning for the disabled child. Okay? So IEP, you can legally change the curriculum. That's what the IEP is. It is the curriculum for the disabled child in the disabled area. So now that you have a math IEP, we're going to change the curriculum. A reading IEP, we're going to change the curriculum. So an IEP allows for modification of instructional goals. 504, there is no modification of instructional goal. You have a 504, you are still expected to perform as well as everybody else in the regular classroom. The fourth difference with a IEP, okay, you're changing the curriculum. With the 504, you're giving them accommodations. A 504 is an accommodation plan. I'll give you an example. You have 3 black boys diagnosed with ADHD. One is going to get a 504. One is going to get an IEP. One is going to get nothing. Let me explain the difference. ADHD boy number 1, his inattention and hyperactivity is affecting his ability to learn. His grades are struggling. He's failing tests because he can't sit still and pay attention. He's going to get an IEP because his ADHD is affecting his ability to learn. Only if it affects their ability to learn do they get an IEP. So that's ADHD boy number 1. ADHD boy number 2, he's the smartest kid in the classroom, but he can't sit still and pay attention. Is his ADHD affecting his learning? No, it is not. His grades are fine, but it is affecting his ability to function. And since his ADHD is affecting his ability to function, he will get a 504 plan that will give him accommodations, such as a one-to-one aid, such as a behavior plan, such as regular breaks from the classroom, such as extra time to take his tests. So he's going to get accommodations. But is he still expected to do 4th grade level work? Yes, he is. He must still achieve at the same rate as the other children. He only gets accommodations. He does not get his instruction modified like the IEP kid will. The 3rd kid has ADHD, but he's not going to get an IEP because it's not affecting his learning, and he's not going to get a 504 because it is not affecting his functioning. The point I'm trying to make is black parents all across this country have to stop letting schools put their children in special ed for ADHD. If that boy can learn in the regular class, I don't care how hyper he is, I don't care how inattentive he is. If he can learn in the regular class without special ed, why in the hell does he have an IEP?
There you go. All right. I want to tie in because we didn't touch on your book. And then the sister brought up a question here that I want you to see. And I think it'll be, I think it'll touch on both what we're trying to do here, which is give parents, especially our grandparents who are doing a hell of a job stepping in and stepping up, stepping out for these young people in the communities whose parents are no longer with us or sent away for a good while. So if you would please touch on this question here. At what point do we hold parents accountable for doing the work at home, such as discipline, structure, homework, diet, etc.? Some of our students lack the structure and discipline from which affects how they would function at school. So there's, from this question, I'm gleaning that there's a question of accountability at home as well. Now, I can imagine where you're going to go with this, but the question is posed to you, good sir.
Okay. There's an African proverb that says it takes a village. I'm going to say it again. It takes a village to raise a child. So if it takes a village to raise a child, why are we always trying to scapegoat the failures of our children as exclusively being due to the irresponsibility of their parents. If it takes a village, why do we never hold the Black church accountable for what they don't do to support our single mothers? If it takes a village, why do we never hold the Black politicians accountable for what they don't fight for to support our single mothers? If it takes a village, why don't we hold the community-based organizations responsible for doing more with that grant money they fight for every year to support our mothers? 67% of Black children are raised by their mother. She's doing the best she can. Do we have mothers who should be doing a better job? Sure. But we have to keep in mind, it's not easy to work multiple jobs, deal with your own medical and psychological and family issues, and then raise 2 or 3 children as well. We are always scapegoating the single Black mother, and I'm tired of it. Scapegoat the Black church, scapegoat the Black politician, scapegoat the community-based organizations, scapegoat the Black businessmen, scapegoat the fraternities and the sororities, scapegoat the Black conscious community. Stop blaming the Black mothers. It is all of our fault. Every time a Black boy gets shot, every time somebody takes the life of one of our children, the community is responsible, not the parents, the entire community. The reason the parents are struggling is they are not being supported by the community. Blame the whole community, not just the vulnerable single Black mother.
And on top of that, I would add in there quite candidly, the teachers are the ones who signing up saying, in public schools in particular, we are prepared as educators to say we are ready to handle who and or whatever walks in that front door in terms of education, in the public education.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree with you more. That's not nullifying the fact that if in fact there's some things we're talking about, the attacks or anything like that, that is outside of the norm. We're not talking about that. We're talking about being unapologetically biased towards ensuring that our kids are receiving a solid quality education. And that starts classroom discipline at every level is predicated upon one thing, in my opinion, as a former administrator, and that is this teacher's subject knowledge mastery. That is the first line of classroom management. Having a teacher that has a solid grasp and not a solid grasp, strike that, a mastery of his or her subject matter. And from there, evidence has been shown where behavior problems decrease because of not having that downtime, and understanding structured transition time, understanding the curriculum, understanding the rapport you need to build with your students. And that brings in a whole other element of cultural competence and cultural awareness and community engagement, et cetera. But I'll go off of my soapbox. This is your time.
Well, to support what you're saying, I would also add, if you look at the research coming from white universities themselves, the number one predictor of classroom success is the teacher's belief that the children can learn. So it doesn't matter how much she's mastered her subject matter. If she don't believe Black boys can learn, right, if she don't believe Black children are intelligent, if her racial biases and assumptions and prejudices are so strong that she cannot see beyond them, I don't care if she was a teacher of the year. I don't care if she got a PhD from Harvard. I don't care if she's been teaching for 30 years. She will not reach them children, because the one thing we have to understand about children, their spirits are so honest that they know whether you care about them or not. The spirit of a child is so honest. They know whether you are there for a paycheck or whether you are there to help them learn. The child knows when the teacher cares or not. And we can't expect the child to try when the child can clearly see that the teacher is not trying. See, if my teacher isn't motivated to teach, why will I be motivated to learn? And on top of that, we have to deal with the emotional abuse that takes place in America's schoolhouses every day from white women and white men towards Black boys and Black girls. The things they say to our children, the underhanded slurs that they make, the way they talk to them and treat them. I'm surprised that more of our children haven't psychologically dropped out of school. Because let us be clear, when our children get criminalized, once that Black boy or girl feels like nothing I do good will be acknowledged, no effort on my part will be highlighted. Once they get criminalized, they psychologically drop out. And they usually psychologically drop out around the 4th and the 5th grade because of the emotional abuse they face from white folks. And then they physically drop out in the 9th or 10th grade. But they psychologically dropped out years before that. So the criminalization of Black children in America's schools has a lot to do with the underachievement. It has a lot to do with the low motivation. It has a lot to do with the low effort, the low interest. Why would I try if I know the teacher don't give a damn?
Amen. And let me just say this. Let's encourage at this point. This is a good point in the discussion to encourage our parents who we recognize are doing the best. And I heard this said by an educator before. Do you really think the parents that are sending their kids to school are sending you their worst kid that they could possibly send? Or do you believe they're sending you their best kid they have to send you? And I would submit that they're sending the best kid that they have to send you because that's their kid. My thoughts are around this piece. When they get there, and this goes back to parenting as well, we as parents, even when we hit our frustrational level with our young people, and I've seen this as an administrator, parents, I'm telling you, not everybody that's showing up in front of your students are advocates for your students. They're advocates for the paycheck. Some of them, most of them, I would be willing to say. So when you are frustrated with your kids, be careful of the words that you use around other people that aren't as closely connected with your kids. And what I mean by that is when the teachers, and I've experienced this, when some teachers see that the parent has given up on the kid, it is easier for them to give up on the kid and not have expectations. It is easier for that school administrator or that teacher to then, instead of giving a second chance, to really go in on that student in suspensions, recommended for IEPs, recommendation for detentions, et cetera, to Dr. Umar's point, further beating down that child psychologically. And then he, she, or they come home to what? A parent being disappointed in you. Why? Because the school is disappointed in you. And so it becomes, there's pressure from all angles on these young people at that point. And what do? Again, we blame the young person. We don't hold everybody accountable. And so for me, I'm always saying to the parents, be careful of the word choice. Be careful of what you say about your students to other people outside of your home that you have to leave your kids with for 7.5 hours a day, that we would like to believe were mentally and emotionally stable, but they're going through, for example, now they've gone through COVID for the first time as well. They've gone through trials and tribulations that they've never faced as well. And now we are leaving our young people out there under their control, we'll say, while arming them with information that they don't need to have. He was bad last night. She didn't go to bed, so forth and so on. So that psychological piece that you were talking about earlier, and I don't have all those letters behind my name, but I got that DAD title, and I know how it works, And so I want you to go back. We can't move away to another topic without talking about your book, because that is going to be a guide for we need to make sure we arm our parents and grandparents appropriately with the correct language, with the correct questions to ask. So more importantly, not just accepting the information from the schools, but letting the schools know that you clearly understand on page 34 of Dr. Umar Johnson's book, it says XYZ when it comes to the IEP, whether that's a meeting or whatever it is that's going on, because we've been railroaded into special ed far too long for far too many reasons that are not applicable.
A point I would like to make for the parents who are listening. Be very careful not to allow the schools to evaluate your children. Number one, if that child is a remote learner at home, the schools are thirsty for more special ed dollars. And because the schools are thirsty for more special ed dollars, many of them are asking parents to consent to psychological evaluations for special education determination. Why should you say no? I'll tell you why you should say no. If the child had trouble being motivated in the classroom, he's going to be doubly troubled trying to remain motivated at home. It is not natural for a child to learn through a computer. So of course the academic achievement is going to drop off. Of course the interest is going to drop off. Of course the motivation is going to drop off because they've been stuck in the house all year. How dare these schools try to exploit this COVID situation, this quarantine situation, this remote learning situation to try to put more children in special ed. If the child is learning at home, if they get an IEP, you're going to have to deliver the IEP at home, or the child is going to have to come to the school to get the specially designed instruction. But the point that I'm making is they're not going to get a quality special ed program because they're still learning from home. So what benefit does it afford to the family of a child who's being put on special ed while they are a remote learner? There is no benefit to a child to have an IEP while they are a remote learner. Do not sign permission for your remote learning child to get tested for special ed. It is nothing but a hustle on part of the school to get some extra money. Number two, we are in May. School ends in May in a lot of states. School ends in June in a lot of school districts. You should not be given permission for your child to get tested at this time of the school year. Why am I saying that? Because your child is at the end of the school year. They're not going to get any special ed help. They're not going to get much special ed help. But more important than that, it was this teacher in this grade with this class who felt your child had a learning problem. Let me say it again. It was this teacher in this grade with this class who felt your child had a learning problem. Because the year is almost over, you should not consent to a special ed evaluation. Let that child go home for the summer. Let him get some tutoring. Let him come back next year with a new teacher, a new grade, a new class, and maybe a new outlook on his education. There's nothing worse than putting a child in special ed next year because of what this year's teachers had to say. Let me say it again. There's nothing worse than putting your child in special ed at the next grade level for what this grade level's teacher has had to say. Now, right, with the book, Psychoacademic Holocaust, that was the first book. Yep. Psychoacademic Holocaust, I'm working on a second edition to that. So you cannot purchase that right now. The second edition will be out soon. All we're doing is adding a few chapters to it. Hopefully that'll be out sometime during the summer. Black Parent Advocate, The Art of War for Dealing with America's Public and Charter Schools is a book that I wrote to provide parents with solutions. How do I deal with the school that wants my child in special ed and I don't think they need it? How do I deal with the school who refuses to test my child for speech problems? How do I deal with the school who has a problem with the fact my child doesn't pledge allegiance to the flag? The first part of the book is all letters that parents can recreate and submit to the schools to respond legally, procedurally, and effectively to what the school is trying to do to their child. Most of my advocacy work with parents is teaching them how to respond to the school. And so the first half of the book is nothing but different topics that are of interest to Black parents, critical topics. All you have to do is read that section, recreate the sample letter that I produced, and send it into the school. The second part of the book is called documentation, where I teach parents how to read and understand the major documents that come from the schoolhouse. So how to read and understand the psychological evaluation report, how to read and understand the IEP, how to read and understand the behavior plan, how to read and understand the pre-referral academic intervention program. There's also a chapter on homeschooling. There's a chapter on how to conduct yourself at a school meeting. There's a chapter on how to change behavior without medication. If I make it to Harrisburg for the Juneteenth celebration on June 20th, I will have the book with me if I make it. If I don't, or if you don't want to wait until then, you can order it at drumarjohnson.com. And also for my Pennsylvania parents in particular, for my Pennsylvania parents, I will be hosting the Pennsylvania Black Parent Boot Camp, Know Your School Rights Boot Camp. So if you live in Pennsylvania, I encourage you to come. It's a 12-hour, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. boot camp where I teach you everything, the disabilities, how to write the letters, understanding the manifestation, the IEP, FAPE, LRE. We go through it all. If you come for that 12-hour training, there's nothing you won't be able to do or understand in the school to protect your child. That training will probably be held in Philadelphia, but it could end up being held in Harrisburg, Lancaster, different possible locations for the Pennsylvania training, but it will only be one training. So once you get that information, make sure you sign up, because every state gets one training. I'll be doing Florida training. We just did Massachusetts training, and I'm working on New York City training, and we're going to do the Pennsylvania training. And for the parents out there, if you want to reach me, you could text message me at 215-989-9858. If you want to come to the training, text me. I'll lock your number in. Once I have the flyer in the location, I will send it to you. Again, that's 215-989-9858. Text me and just say, Dr. Umar, I want to come to the Pennsylvania boot camp. Please let me know where and when it will be.
All right, now you know we the capital city, so everybody needs to come to Central Pennsylvania. We need to do that here. You know I'm selfish like that.
Well, Philly, the largest city, so I don't know.
We the capital city. They all come here to make
we the largest city.
Hey, all right. We already had this conversation from Clarion to Millersville.
But seriously, though, if y'all have a location in Harrisburg that can seat 50 parents socially distanced with tables and chairs, a minimum of 50, it can be more, but no less than 50 socially distanced with tables and chairs, we could consider Harrisburg. Remember, I went to school, Millersville University up in the building, Millersville University alumni.
I tried to shout out Clarion, but you tried to overtalk me. So you go again.
MU, baby, MU, Marauderville.
Hey, look. Let me. So this one, I don't want to disrespect our living two Americas, but I don't want. Do you have that hard stop at 10?
Nah, we good. We got a few minutes after.
My man, no doubt. So we're gonna roll on into living in two Americas. And the first thing I want to touch on, of course, is the January 6th racist riots that took place. Our theme has been living in two Americas. We wanted to talk clearly about what was seen, how it was handled. We don't even need to talk about if it was Black people. We already know that part. Let's talk about why there was no real consequences till this day. While there has not been any real action to ensure that this would never happen again. In fact, things are, in essence, from my perspective, allowed to be perpetuated for another one, should the other side so choose to. Let's talk a bit about living in two Americas, especially
2 points.
All right.
2 points that I would bring up with the Capitol riots. Point number one is white privilege.
Okay.
We saw white privilege on display in a way we haven't seen in quite a long time. We've seen white people scale buildings, beat up police, vandalize offices, and almost nothing was done to them. And then in the aftermath of the Capitol riots, we saw elected officials defend the Capitol riots and say that they had a constitutional right to do what they did. Now, the irony and the hypocrisy of the Capitol riot lies in the fact that white folk were upset that they lost an election. They lost an election and they overran the Capitol. Black people are losing our lives on a daily basis. And we're told to stand down and accept the rule of law. So how is it that when a black person is unjustifiably murdered, we are told to stand down and accept the rule of law, but white folks can merely lose an election? Not a life, not a life. They lost an election and were allowed to overrun the Capitol. But when black people lose our lives, we're supposed to accept the rule of law. But here's the other point as to why it was accepted by the white power structure to let white folk do what they did. The Civil War, although 150 years old, is still very fresh in America's memory. And America understands that this country is held together by the thinnest of threads. I'm not talking black folks, I'm talking white folks. By the thinnest of threads. And this country also knows that there are more arms and guns in the hands of white civilians than is in the hands of the U.S. military. Now, the U.S. military has better weapons, but the American public has more weapons. And if you were to put 500,000 U.S. soldiers against 400 million white folks, I think we all know who wins that war. So when you talk about your right to govern comes from the consent of the public, that holds very true. That Fourth Amendment, that right to bear arms, that has this government walking on eggshells when it comes to not upsetting the everyday white American, because the Civil War can happen again. It can very much happen again. And this government knows that what all these white folks have been through these past couple years, they had better tread lightly. If they would have mowed down those white folks the way they would have done black folks, a second Civil War may have been triggered, and they know it. That's why they stood down. America cannot win a war against its own white citizens.
I hear you. I hear you. You also touched on the Breakfast Club. You touched on that piece, white supremacy, the agendas hiding behind black skin. You touched on feminism, LGBTQ, multiculturalism. You was touching on a bunch of stuff. I mean, that was fire. As always.
Yeah, those are the new faces of racism. See, and I want people to be very clear with where I stand. I love all black people. Gay, straight, feminist, whatever you into, lesbian. I love all black people. The reason I wanted to be a psychologist was to heal my people. That's why I got into the field. Although I love all black folks, doesn't mean I cannot disagree with them. And see, this is where the dictatorial culture of feminism and the dictatorial culture of multiculturalism and the dictatorial culture of the LGBTQ community comes in. I take issue with the dictatorial culture of these three movements that have people feeling like if you disagree with me, you are automatically a hate monger. If you disagree with me, you automatically want to cause harm or hurt to me. Nothing could be further from the truth. Nothing could be further from the truth. I do therapy with homosexuals. I do therapy with abused women. I do therapy with people of other races. So I don't have an issue with that. But as a black man and as a Pan-Africanist and as a Pan-Africanist who's concerned about the liberation and best interests of my people, I will disagree with anything that I feel is not a benefit to our community. Same-sex relationship, I don't see a benefit of that lifestyle to our community. Do I have a problem with you living your life how you want to live your life? No, I don't. But don't ask me to endorse it. We don't have enough black men out here for black women as it is. How can I confirm or condone a man with a man when we got a shortage of men for our sisters? How can I, looking at the assault on the traditional black family, feminism, how can I sit back and look at an agenda that wants to demonize the black man and make him the scapegoat for everything the white man has done? I can't do that, feminists, and I'm not going to do it. I can't stand by and let people equate the Asian issue and the Latino issue and the poor white issue and the immigrant issue with the enslaved African issue and the offspring of the enslaved African issue. Homosexuals didn't build America. Black people did. Latinos didn't build America. Black people did. Irish, Italian, and Jewish immigrants didn't build America. Black people did. So don't come in and say that your movement has to be married to mine. You came as an immigrant. I came as an import. I was once considered to not be a human being in this country. Before black people could fight to be free, we had to prove we were people. Nobody else in America has ever been enslaved but us. Nobody else in America came as an import but us. Nobody else in America was dehumanized but us. Nobody else in America was forbidden to get an education, even under threat of death or incarceration, but us. I have no problem. I wish Asians the best. I wish Latinos the best. I wish Irish the best. I wish Jews the best. I wish the Chinese and the East Indians the best. But you will not equate your struggle with mine. All of you put together cannot equal what the black man and woman have been through. And at the end of the day, if it's that bad for you, you can go home. Black people can't go home because slavery destroyed the psychological umbilical cord that attached Black America to Black Africa. The white man created his own problem when he psychologically cut off the black man and woman from our ancestral homeland. Everybody got a home to go back to except American Africans, because the white man stole our memory and stole our affinity and stole our connection to our ancestral homeland. So with all due respect, I respect all other groups, but don't you ever try to compare your struggle with the black man or woman's. Whenever you do that, I will reject it unapologetically so.
No apologies necessary. What I'm going to transition to at that point is you talk clearly about white supremacy. You talk clearly about the white Americans basically knowing that their numbers are dwindling. And you started highlighting the benefits of why Joe Biden, President Biden at this point, made an executive order specific to Asian Americans, and the anti-lynching law is still out there yet to be passed. Talk about the history.
After 200 attempts.
After 200.
There have been 200 separate attempts to pass an anti-lynching bill in the U.S. Congress. These attempts go back to slavery itself.
Right.
200 separate bills introduced into the U.S. Congress to make the lynching of a black man or woman a federal crime. And guess what? 200 attempts and not one has passed. The Emmett Till anti-lynching bill is creeping through Congress again. Okay, introduced by Representative Bobby Rush, who served with the great Fred Hampton, chairman of the Illinois Black Panther Party. He's the one of the co-authors of it, but it still hasn't passed. But the anti-Asian hate bill passed the Senate on the first vote, and only one person voted against it. So how is it that Asians can get the approval that quick, and black people been trying for 400 years to make lynching a federal crime, and we haven't succeeded yet? And that is because America is still America. The black man and the black woman's life doesn't mean anything. Frederick Douglass wrote in his autobiography, one of them, he said he used to frequently hear white people say that the life of a Negro was worth but a nickel, and the life of a freed Negro wasn't worth but a penny. I forget the exact statement, but he basically talked about the lack of value that is placed upon Black people. And we need to understand something too. We got to get back to African culture, because European culture values people based on family name, education, income, and assets. Family name, education, income, and assets. So European culture, Karl can be worth more than me. I can be worth more than Karl based on superficial attributes. In African culture, the richest man on the planet, his life is no more valuable than the homeless man in the street. And as Black people, we got to get back to being who we are. We cannot lose ourselves in European culture, because their culture doesn't even work for them. It doesn't even work for them, and it damn sure ain't gonna work for us.
All right. If you like this type of conversation, this content, we continue to tell you that we are going to make sure we bring you individuals, powerful individuals, decision makers, or those with connections to them, so that you can have access to them here at A Seat at the Table. You need to make sure you like, share, follow us on YouTube, as well as our Facebook channel, A Seat at the Table, hosted by Karl Singleton. Dr. Johnson and others will continue. We'll ask you to remain actively engaged with us in our comments section, on our page, on YouTube, as well as on Facebook. If you wouldn't mind putting your information, your contact information in the comments section, that would be great. We are just thrilled to make sure we are thrilled that you made an offer that you may be able to attend on June 20th, Sunday, June 20th. Of course, I'm going to do everything in my power. You already know how I do, to try to get that parent boot camp here in Harrisburg, as the capital city. Definitely want to have that here. The other thing is, Juneteenth is going to be that Saturday, June 19th. We're turning it into an entire weekend, that 19th and 20th, because there's another holiday around there some people may have heard of called Father's Day on that Sunday. And so we have a lot of things planned as well. Before we sign off, Brother Johnson, I want to give you a chance to, have some last words, not only about the topics we touched today. I want to definitely going to have you back on, because I still want to touch on some other, other topics. But the most important takeaway that I always want people to have is that education piece, because independent of whatever is published, about you, with you, whatever, you've stayed true to being unapologetically Black and concerned for the Black community via education, and making sure that the system that we are, in essence, forced into works for us as best it can, until we can find something for ourselves, such as, but not limited to, your school. So I want to give you a moment just to give some parting shots, not to sign off right now. I want you to still hold on for a minute. But if there's something that you can do or say to those parents out there that are, struggling, this is their first time being parents through COVID. This is their first time in Harrisburg in particular. I'm being selfish right here. In Harrisburg in particular, this is our first time with a lot of our either two-parent homes and or single-parent homes, whether that's led by grandparents or mom and dad, or one mom, one dad, however it's going down. This is a lot of our first times experiencing COVID, this level of violence, our young people access to these guns. We need some encouragement from you, most importantly from as a Black man, but one who understands the system inside and out, as it relates to education, as we're trying to matriculate on the other side of COVID here.
One of the things that Black parents have not done in America, not in modern times, was organize themselves. One of the organizations that I started, the National Independent Black Parent Association, is an organization that seeks to bring Black parents together so they can fight collectively as one force against the various forces of evil that come up against our children in the school system. Each chapter of the National Independent Black Parent Association has 6 committees. They have a homeschooling committee to organize homeschooling parents. They have an economic committee to investigate how the school district is spending our children's money. Special ed committee to police the special ed culture of a school to make sure they're not unjustifiably putting kids in special ed for behavior problems, which is illegal. We also have a committee to deal with policy to change the rules in the schools that disproportionately and negatively affect Black children. We have a social support committee to help parents who are struggling outside of school, employment, food, clothing, shelter, abuse, chemical addiction, so forth and so on. And we have a parent advocacy committee for parents to accompany our parents to meetings to make sure their rights are upheld. So any parent who is listening to me, if you would like to start a chapter of the National Independent Black Parent Association, please get in contact with me. Don't say you want to do this if you're lazy. Don't say you want to do this if you don't want to organize. This can't be done on Twitter. This can't be done on Instagram. This can't be done on Facebook. You have to get up off your behind, get out into the street, meet parents, get their phone numbers, knock on doors, pick them up, bring them to your meeting so we can organize. Stokely Carmichael said, if you organize a little, you get a little done. If you organize some, you get some done. But if you don't organize at all, you don't get anything done. The most honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey said, disorganization is the greatest weapon used against the Negro, brothers and sisters. So we have to organize. And we also have to start thinking about opening our own schools for our children, because America is getting increasingly hostile towards the American African. We are being forced to do for ourselves. And I don't have a problem with that, because we should always do for ourselves. But one of the things that slavery did was it killed the natural desire of the Black man and woman in America to want to create your own empire and control your own destiny. We're the only people in America, no matter how much money we make, we do not want to build for ourselves. We would rather use the white man's hospital instead of building our own hospital. We want to work at the white man's factory instead of building our own factory. We want to send our kids to the white man's schools instead of building our own schools. We must organize and create our own empire. Organization is the only safety for Black people.
All right. Before we let you go, I want to end with a couple things. Number one, as my grandmother says, we talked a lot about teachers today. And as my grandmother would say, only the kick dog hollers. So if the shoe fits, I guess it's applicable. We were talking about those individuals who need to be removed from our schools.
Absolutely.
If you do not love, have empathy, compassion, and affection for young people, you should not be in front of our young people. That is our point. I'm prefacing that to say this is National Teachers Awareness Appreciation Week. So we want to wish all you teachers out there who are staying the course, who have that empathy, compassion, and commitment to the kids in the community, a happy Teacher Appreciation Week. We love you. We support you. If there's something that we can do, we could be a resource for you. We are definitely here to be just that. And I won't even acknowledge the other side that might be, in people's minds. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week to those of you who are out there doing this job day in and day out with fidelity. We love you and we need you. We support you. This coming Thursday, back at our regular time at 6 o'clock, we will have Dauphin County Commissioner Mike Priest at 6 p.m. We will definitely be talking about funding. We'll be talking about accessible capital with regards to small business, et cetera, so forth and so on. And it's looking forward. I'm looking forward to having Commissioner Priest on because he is in a position to ensure that dollars, when it comes through the county level, are dispersed equitably throughout the entire county. And newsflash, Harrisburg City is in Dauphin County. With that being said, YouTube again, like, subscribe, pass it on. A seat at the table hosted by Karl Singleton, as well as liking our Facebook page, passing it on. Dr. Johnson, again, we're definitely hoping that you can make it here on the 20th of June for that Juneteenth celebration. Last but not least, I want you to highlight your book one more time on our way out because this is a must have with regards to the education system, especially dealing with our young Black boys and girls in these learning environments post COVID. This is a book that must be had. Again,
Indeed, indeed. And even if I don't get to Harrisburg on the 20th, and I'm going to do everything I can to do it, but even if I don't, I will be coming to Harrisburg to do a book release for Black Parent Advocate. I already have a location for that, but I'm going to try to get there on the 20th. But if not, I still will be having a date soon. Also, for my Pennsylvania family, because I don't do a lot, or should I say I don't do as much in Pennsylvania. If you live in Pennsylvania, and we have 501 school districts in Pennsylvania, if you live in Pennsylvania, I don't care if you Pittsburgh, Aliquippa, Allentown, if you want to host a talk, a free talk for the parents in your community with Dr. Umar, please get in contact with me. I want to travel throughout the great state of Pennsylvania, and I want to touch as many Black parents as I can. So whether you live in the western part of the state, the southern part of Pennsylvania, the northern part of Pennsylvania, the western part of Pennsylvania, the central part of Pennsylvania, if you have a space where Dr. Umar can come and do a free seminar for the parents, please get in contact with me because I want to do more in my birth state of Pennsylvania. 215-989-9858. If you're interested in the book, you can order it at drumarjohnson.com, or you can wait until the Harrisburg book signing. I'm also going to be doing one in Lancaster, also one in York. I have a couple stops in PA that I'm going to be making. But I want to read a quick quote from the Honorable Frederick Douglass, who said, let me go back here. A man who will not fight for himself when he has the means of doing so is not worth being fought for by others. A man who does not value freedom for himself will never value it for others or put himself to any inconvenience to gain it for others. Frederick Douglass said, who would be free? Themselves must strike the first blow. He says that the whole history of the progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. The conflict has been exciting, agitating, all-absorbing, and for the time being, putting all other tumults to silence. It must do this or it does nothing. Those who profess to favor freedom and deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want the rain without the thunder and the lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. He said the struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue until they are resisted with either words or blows or both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Brothers and sisters, we must unite and we must fight. Black power.
And again, you heard it here. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Johnson. We'll see you soon. Again, to our listeners and viewers, we appreciate you. We value you. If you like to see and or hear more content like this, email us, subscribe, like, follow us on Facebook. We're here for you. Again, we'll be back this Thursday at 6 p.m. with Dauphin County Commissioner Mike Priest for the first episode at 6 o'clock upon our return on A Seat at the Table, hosted by yours truly, Karl Singleton. Thanks you for joining us. Again, Dr. Johnson, if you could jump into the comment section for a second, we'd appreciate that. Thanks for your time. I'll be reaching out to you shortly. Stay well. Appreciate it. Peace.
Bye.